it's kind of strange that this is going to be our last. It's not strange. It's actually a bit sad that this will be our last book until the fall. But but I wanted to start tonight's book club with something that was actually kind of in the middle of the reading that we did today. I know last week and kind of throughout this book, we've had differences of opinion on Poppy and his character and his role. Ron, I know you and Lots, who is, I don't think it's here right now, and some others felt that he was doing everything that he could and taking care of the family. And I know that myself and a couple of the ladies in the room, Barbara, have other opinions. And I thought it was really interesting how that kind of finally those words were kind of on the page. On page, if you have the physical copy, on page 206 at the very bottom, I kind of wanted to start out and get some of your thoughts on this, how they have that back and forth, Mommy and Poppy, where Mommy's talking about they're going to New York. I think Negi or Esmeralda, this is her first time hearing that she'll be going to New York. And Mommy's like, what am I going to do? Like, stay here? You haven't married me. I have 7 of your children. Like, this is like a train going nowhere. And Poppy's like, I've given you a home. I'm not a rich man, but we've never gone hungry. And they're having that same kind of battle on the page that we've been having in the book club. Did anyone else think of that or notice that? I thought that was interesting, and kind of how it never really, it seems like Esmeralda doesn't really take a side. She kind of lets them have it out on the page in the argument, and it doesn't really seem like she takes a full side to me.
It would feel like for Esmeralda, or Negi for that matter, to take a side would be to diminish her father. Kind of going back to that whole idea of how the father is written. Mm-hmm. Again, he is written so blankly, without a full development of who he is. Like, if she takes a side, then he is completely, it's almost like, why is he even in the book? If he doesn't have, or one of the other Negi in this case, doesn't at least believe in him as somebody who is willing to step up, whether he can or whether he sincerely wants to. I mean, all of his actions, throughout their relationship would say, he wants to step up, but he's really not committed to it, because he's willing to leave her or at least step out on her. And for some weird reason, she's willing to take him back all the time. But yeah, it just felt like we had to give him at least this moment for him to have any redemption in the book.
What do y'all think about that? Because I have some other thoughts on that too. Because, there's even that part where they start the business, they start like the food truck. And there's even that part where Poppy, like, I think the line is that he would take credit. He would like take credit, and then people would like never pay him back, and the truck was too expensive to run, and the business didn't last long. It ended up going under pretty soon. But even that part, like, that he didn't even have the heart to like get the money, for the family from the business that he was running. It's very interesting to me. I mean, it felt good that Mommy was finally kind of stepping out on her own, and she didn't want to stay there and keep wandering through that little hut through on the island from house to house, wondering if he's going to come home after the 6th kid or the 7th kid or the 8th kid. So it did feel good when she kind of took that stand. But I mean, can you even really leave somebody that you have 8 kids with, you know, or 7 kids with? So I don't know. What are some of your thoughts on that, like that kind of back and forth that they had? Because really, I mean, I think I knew we knew they were fighting in the beginning, but it seemed like these pages, they were really fighting. Like we really got a sense that they disliked each other. Not just that Mommy didn't like Poppy, but they were having problems. They both disliked each other. It kind of felt.
I think that I think she mentions in the book that they were together for like 14 years, right? That the mom did. So you have to think, right? Like some relationships grow stagnant. And so you have to constantly like reawaken them and reinvent and things like that. So I thought like what she was writing was like very real too, you know, with but witnessing this through like a child's eyes, right? So you kind of don't want to take sides and when there's an argument, because also you're also fearful about the severity, right, of what it could lead to, like arguments leading to fights and things like that. So there's a lot of trauma involved.
Plus, didn't she want him to marry her? She said, "You won't marry me and you won't leave me alone."
Yeah, but why is he gonna marry her? I mean, they keep having like 8 kids, kid after kid. He gets to do what he wants to do, have other kids, and you know.
But he,
I
Buy
agree
the cow when you could get
100%.
the milk for free. Basically, what?
Exactly.
but he did make a point of saying, I've given my name to all of the kids. Like, what more do you want?
Oh, well, thank
For
you,
what?
Poppy.
So what? Thank you for your last name. Thank you.
What type of issue was that? I didn't like that part at all, actually. I had a lot of beef with that line. Like, I've given them my name, what more do you want? That blew my mind, actually.
So, but just one more thing on that though. Then that was probably a big thing. Like, again, we're thinking like how we think about the institution of marriage, that it is this legal process where you need a permit and all of that. Their relationship is probably the equivalent of, except for his philandering, but the mere fact that they are not bound by paper, that's a marriage. That probably was a marriage back then. That's probably how most marriages look. Not the fact that the guy is always stepping out and having affairs, but the fact that they're living together, not married, but he is also giving the children his name as a way to, again, in quotes, legitimize the children. The only difference is now you would need a legal piece of paper to say you were married. But I'm sure in the 40s and 50s and all the islands, you probably met somebody, stayed with them, had children with them without ever getting married unless you were pressed by the church to do so.
And what is common law?
I'm still Team Poppy. Common law is 7 years. If you're together for 7 years.
Don't you have to apply for that?
But that's the thing. You have to prove through receipts and bills that you've been together for 7 years. Like you have to have established a common life together where your name is appearing on documents.
Not just the 7 kids.
How about the kids?
Yeah. Right.
How about 7 kids for 7 years?
Maybe.
Throughout 7 years.
Boom, 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 boom.
Poppy's not a lawyer. He's trying to do his best.
Well, she also says you won't leave me alone after she says you won't marry me and you won't leave me alone. So you can, it's either.
But she takes him back. Sure. He knocks on the door and she opens the door.
That's some nookie for her.
What else is he supposed to do? He knocks on the door, mama, knock, knock, knock. She opens the door.
You don't believe this, Ron. You're just playing the devil's advocate.
Well, it must be good because she keeps on and he won't marry her.
Well, of course it's good.
Well, she keeps,
Hey, that's our only man too.
she keeps on
While
and
he's
on and
out
on.
being a sinvergüenza with other women, that's our only, ding dong.
Or so we
Finally.
know.
Finally, she leaves him.
Ron, I have to agree with you that I don't know, this is when I look about the marriages like back in the 1940s and 50s, like my entire family from my mom's side, pretty much, they will get together and last not just a decade, but more than a decade. My parents were together for 20 years, not legally married through paper, and a lot of my uncles and aunts. And the only reasons they started to, do it legalized was because if they wanted to come to America, they needed to legalize that. But that was not such a common thing of people, especially in the countryside, and thinking about the community that she grew up. It was like in the countryside or the mountain, the valleys, I'm not sure. But it was something that wasn't so common. And the idea of her wanting to get married, when I'm looking at the timeline, it started after she started traveling to New York. So I wonder if that influenced her decision. But like during those time, like it was something that just thinking about my own family, like getting married wasn't such, like, legally, it wasn't like a huge thing.
Well, because maybe there was nothing to gain from it at that time.
Right.
You had your man back and forth. He was providing a home and some money and, planting a seed. So, that's actually what the man was good for at that time.
I feel like more people are coming over to Team Poppy.
To what?
Anna, she's not over there. She's with us.
Poppy.
Don't get it twisted. Anna,
No.
speak up. Come on.
I mean,
now.
my mother came here in the 50s without a man, with a belly, and with my 5-year-old sibling that I have. So, men are really, at that time, they were important, but let's face it, my mother had to come here, not knowing English and the same way. And she, she did without whoever was the man, in her life in Puerto Rico. Leave his ass in Puerto Rico.
And
Miss
that's
Sherry,
what
if
she
you're
does.
talking, I think you're muted.
Now you're muted.
Okay. I think she's gonna type what she's saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I was also wondering, like what Liliana just said, it did seem like once Mommy came back from New York, this trip that she took to go to the doctor, it did seem that a lot of her values were different, right? She was dressing differently. Her whole air was different. And that happens, right? Especially if you come to New York for a brief period, or LA, or big city, a big metropolitan city like that. And I did wonder if that had any influence on her wanting to get married legally. Not really just because she was so madly in love with Poppy, but because it was almost like, okay, I'm gonna say this, so it's said, you won't marry me and you won't leave me alone, but I've been to New York and there are some men who I probably can get, even with these 7 kids. So I'm gonna say this, so it's said, and if you don't want to get married, then I'm gonna have to see you later. You know, it kind of felt like that too. Like, it didn't seem like she was madly in love. It seemed like she was ready to move on, you know, because he obviously didn't have a problem moving on and on again. You know who he reminds me of? Nick Cannon. Y'all see all them?
Oh, who's that? Mariah Carey's husband?
Tell us
Ex-
more.
What does he
Baby
have, like
daddy?
7 or 8 children
Yes.
Like this year.
by
With
different
all
people?
How
different
many kids
baby
does he
mothers.
have?
He has
Let
like
me
8
see.
children.
Is that for real?
He had 4
Wait,
this
I'm
year.
gonna Google this.
He had 4
Oh
children.
yeah, it's true.
And I'm
Well-
like, Poppy is Nick Cannon out here in these streets, just like,
And were the first 2 with Mariah?
Oh, really?
I don't know if that was the first 2 or the second 2 or what, but he had
Twins?
twins with Mariah Carey too, yeah. But
Oh.
Poppy kind of reminds me of Nick Cannon in that sense, where
No,
he
Nick
loves
Cannon
them
reminds you of Poppy.
and he's just like loving them and leaving them, you know? So I wonder,
Where that term came from, right? Love them and leave them.
and you know, I kind of seen, I wondered, I guess, a part of me wondered, especially kind of seeing Negi watching this dysfunctional relationship display. Part of me wondered like what type of man she was going to be choosing, right? When she became a señorita. And
And it was the one that laughed at her.
there was the one that laughed at her. Y'all notice that?
Which one?
I think his last name was like, he was American, I think.
Johannes.
Johannes, the left.
Johannes.
So
Oh, was he a New Yorican or he was American?
that was really interesting to me. How she didn't, but I mean, again, she wasn't a popular kid. It didn't seem like she was very popular in school, but the one kind of like love interest we get is somebody that's not very emotionally available for her.
You're talking about Negi?
Yeah,
In New York or in Puerto Rico?
in
In
PR.
Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico.
It was,
That's
the,
getting
it
less.
was the boy that asked to hold her books.
Oh, that puppy love. Come on.
But you know what was interesting about that though? When the mother finds out, it feels like they immediately start prepping Negi almost to be married.
Yep.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I was getting flashbacks of Dominicana.
Right. I
Yeah,
think she's
true.
12. I think she was like 12
Mhm.
at the time. F that. I was like, you know, calling her senorita and inviting him over and things like
It's
that.
a courting thing.
It was like 12 though.
Yeah, but that's how they court back then, you know? It's a courting
like it.
phase.
I felt serious.
As soon as they saw that he was born in Kentucky, things changed. And they wanted to get married.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
That is true.
And I think also his dad was in the military or the Marines or
Something like
something.
that. Yeah.
He was a brat.
Oh, he's good. He's got a good job.
Mhm.
So that was interesting to me. I noted that. I did think it was interesting how she really did not want to come to New York at all. Negi was not interested in coming to New York at all. Yet she didn't really have a life in Puerto Rico either. You know, she had no friends. She was completely almost invisible with all those brothers and sisters that she had. She wasn't getting like a whole bunch of attention from her parents. She was watching their marriage fall apart, or their relationship rather fall apart. Yet she wasn't very enthusiastic about getting away from it all. I found that interesting. How we can be so how even if a home is dysfunctional, we can find comfort there, right? A familiarity that we don't want to leave, you know?
Yeah, that's what Miss Sherry was saying in the chat about the point that I made about trauma and that dysfunction. She said dysfunctional is beautiful to you if you don't know anything else. So I think that definitely echoes into Negi with the whole moving, right? She doesn't want to leave what's familiar to her, even if it's shit. She doesn't want to leave what's familiar to her because of that fear of the unknown and not being accepted. And and she had to she knew how to handle kind of the ostracization when they were calling her like the Hibara and stuff in her own country, right? But now to go to this foreign land, like she was probably worried about how she'd be perceived, especially during that age where you're kind of like, you're going through puberty, your hormones are all over the place, and you're really trying to find like a peer group to kind of gravitate towards. And she's constantly isolated, right? Like she's left by herself. Even when mommy goes to New York and leaves her with the uncle and they're like peeling potatoes and all that stuff. It's like she's constantly isolated and by herself, or like, and I guess that's kind of like the thing with being like the eldest sibling and being irresponsible, like you're parentified and kind of like the adult. But there's a lot of trauma that goes with that as well, because you're not allowed to grow up yourself. And and we see that because she's constantly ignored by mommy, and she's telling her like, you don't even care how I feel, like you're breaking this chicken's neck and I'm telling you something that's like pretty important to me.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, that was interesting. That scene was interesting. I guess she was trying to make dinner, and Negi's literally, I think her literal words were like, "No one loves me," and the mom's like, "Oh God, this chicken won't die,"
Yeah.
Like, that we get that throughout the whole book, though, right?
And the mom is just kind of like, I love you, like shut up.
It's almost though like, Willie, like you have to know I love you. You see, I'm literally killing a chicken to make dinner for you right now. Like this is how I'm showing my love, right? Like Barbara was saying a couple weeks ago about how that idea of time, the idea of not having the time to sit down and say, no, you are loved by me. You are loved by your father. That having the time to be there emotionally for your children and showing that love, because you're taking that time to show the action of love, right? Preparing dinner and working to provide a roof over their heads, and being pregnant and providing more family on
Right,
family.
and the smaller kids need more attention, more tending to, so she gets kind of pushed to the sides, which I thought was interesting when she was meeting when that guy when the boy Johannes came, and she was like off to the sides anyway, right, to the creek, and then like she was like swallowed by the mud and just totally embarrassed and made a spectacle of.
Right. When they came to New York, I did think it was interesting, for those of us that live in New York, I did think it was interesting, like where they are in Brooklyn. Like if you've been to that part of Brooklyn, I was just there on Saturday, Williamsburg. It's so white, and so gentrified. The way that she describes Williamsburg, especially Graham Avenue, is completely different to what it looks like now. And I did think it was interesting. I really, on page 225, when they're talking about race and how mommy says like, oh, she's like, oh, there are Black people here. And Negi's like, there's Black people here, but they don't really look exactly like the Black people we have in Puerto Rico. And they have that conversation about how like the neighborhoods are segregated, and like, what did she say exactly?
The Italians, the Jewish, and the Morenos, and it's split amongst those three particular groups. When you go to La Marqueta, the Jews in La Marqueta will haggle. When you go to another part of Brooklyn, where is more money, the Jews there are not about to haggle with you. And the Italians, even though they look a little more like Puerto Ricans, they don't like us either. And the Morenos, they're afraid that they're gonna take our jobs. So there you go.
So I thought it was interesting how she says like, wait, the Black people don't like us here? Like everyone I know in Puerto Rico is either Black or has a Black relative. Like what's going on? I did think that was really interesting how she kind of described that confusion. What did y'all think about that? Because the mom is like, there's enough work here for everybody, but some people just think that, and she's right, there is enough work in America for everybody. And then she says like, some people think that some work is beneath them, but if I have to like crawl on the floor to earn a living, I'll do it. You know, again, talking about like showing love instead of saying maybe I love you. I think that's a good example there too.
But that's also that.
And it's also survival.
I'm sorry, Willie.
No, I was saying it was also survival, right?
But that's also part of that corrosive narrative, you know, that Black people are afraid, or excuse me, how the mother frames it, that there's some people who don't want to work, but she will do anything to, you know, to sort of feed her family, as though those people, and I had assumed she was talking about Black people. Like there's certain people who don't want to do certain jobs and she'll do anything to feed her family, which is that narrative, you know, that Black people are lazy and don't like to work.
I didn't take it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I took it more like what she said, you know, like, and it goes on with other cultures where when the new cultures come here, other people don't want to be doing like getting on their knees and being maids and cleaning houses, where the new immigrants will do it. And it doesn't say that the other people who don't want to do it are lazy, but that they just, you know, they're a little bit above the, you know, whatever that particular economic range is. So I didn't take it that way where she's belittling the Black people. She's just saying that, you know, they don't like us because we're taking their jobs, which they don't really want to do at this point, which
Yeah,
maybe they used to do.
Microaggression though. You know, it's definitely a microaggression and it's implied.
I thought so.
Mm-hmm.
But you could be right, Anna.
Liliana, it's on page 225, like right in the middle of the page, this section that we're talking about. But I mean, even after that, like right before the break at the bottom of the page, even as Esmeralda writes, it would be so embarrassing to come all the way from Puerto Rico to be a maid. Like even she kind of writes that. So I thought that was interesting, right? These ideas of labor and jobs and who has them and who's above what in America. Because if that's the case, by that logic, kind of that was just described, if that's the case, then Black Americans would have all of the best jobs because they're the people that have been here the longest. So if that was like the case, and Paul Mooney said it best when he said Black people have been called lazy since they've stopped working for free. And he's fucking right, you know? So God rest his soul. So like, if that were the case by that logic, then when you come here, perhaps you should be expected to not have the best job when you first get off the train, right? Or when you first get off the plane. It probably should be expected that you, and Mommy does expect it, right? She has this mindset of like, if I do have to scrub floors, that's what I'm going to do. It's not even really going to be a question. It's Nagy or Esmeralda that says it might be a bit embarrassing, right? So it's so interesting, this idea of what labor means and what jobs mean and the hierarchy of them. Because I think how Mommy sees it is almost like if we're eating, then like that's the goal, right? The goal has been accomplished because we have money and we're eating where there's a roof over our head, which would also kind of explain, you know, perhaps why she stays with Poppy for so long, right? Is he the best man? No, absolutely not, in no sense of the word, but he's there. Is scrubbing floors the best job you can have? Absolutely not, but it's a gig, right? So I don't know. What do y'all think about? Do we
That's
have any other
true. I agree with you, Brandon.
I really do think that those are the narratives that, you know, she perceived that her family in and and here in New York, those were the stories that they told her mom, and her mom told Negi. And so those are the narratives that are already instilled in those community already. So you can already see the divide that there is, and these are the, you know, the language, the I guess, you know, what's being said about each other's community and such.
Also want to point out Sherry's question as well in the chat, because I think it's very relevant. Talking about, you're an adult writing a memoir, you're going to paint yourself as more intelligent back then than maybe you were. So whether she was able to really understand that as a kid, that her mom being a maid was beneath her station, or is that Negi as an adult saying, oh, I thought mom being a maid would be embarrassing?
Yeah.
Yes, I was just writing back to that question. Absolutely. There are a few times like that in this book that I think about often, to Ron's point, where like, is that really what she thought at 13, you know, first time being in America? Or is that, you know, the language that, you know, 30 or 40-year-old Esmeralda has put in her 12-year-old mind?
Even when Negi has to be enrolled in school, and she talks the principal into like putting her in a well, maybe not a smart class, but not the worst class, or not the grade that she was supposed to be assigned to, which is a grade beneath her, but she somehow talks the principal into keeping her in her proper grade, even though it's in a class that I don't even know. I went to school, when I went to school, the classes would use numbers, 8-1, 8-2, 8-3, but she was in a school that went up to 8-23. I was like, oh my God, them kids must have been crazy in that class.
Yeah. They used to level them in the special ed. I forget the size 6, size 7.
Yeah, I mean, we went up to class 6 or 7, but class 23, it's like,
That's up there, man.
gracious.
I didn't get that part because I didn't go to school in New York and we didn't have that. And
Oh yeah.
it seemed very traumatic to me to like be classifying these kids. Maybe
That's why they changed it.
but classifying these kids in their intellectual space and like segregating, it felt very counterproductive to learning, actually.
That whole part though shows how far her own advocacy skills come into play. The fact that she asserted herself back in Puerto Rico when she was getting static from people at the school that she didn't agree with, and now that's, you know, reaping benefits because now she's standing up for herself and it's actually getting her somewhere. She even notes the fact that, oh, if I talked like this to someone in Puerto Rico, my mom would have smacked me or something along those lines. But now the guy caved in, was willing to give her a shot in 8th grade. If she proved herself, she could stay there. If not, she'd get sent back to 7th grade. But, you know, it's because she found her voice back in Puerto Rico that she was able to even pull that off.
I wondered if a little part of that had to do with her not really having the desire to like fit in. You know, she wasn't really a girl who seemed like she had that desire to fit in and kind of follow the crowd to walk around it type of thing. So that was a bit admirable to me too. But at the same time, I did think, well, Puerto Rico isn't another country. It is technically a territory of the United States. So in that school they were in, weren't those English teachers, like those, weren't those American teachers anyways? Like, shouldn't the education shouldn't have been too far off? I wondered about that.
Well, didn't she go to, I forget where she was, where one teacher only spoke English, and then when she went to another part of Puerto Rico, they only spoke Spanish. So I know Puerto Rico is Spanish, and they do speak English. So I don't know if English is their first language now or then, but you know, she was taught reading, writing, and arithmetic.
She was probably smart, just didn't speak English well.
Well, that's what happens with bilingual kids. So you're bilingual, so you have special needs, not, but like you said, early on in education, that's why they have, you know, Lao versus Brown Board of Ed or whatever. You know, the Chinese were the first to bring to the attention to the Board of Education that just because you didn't speak English didn't mean you weren't using your brain. So I don't think it was during that time though. In the back of this book, they have Reader's Guide, right? And it says something about that When I Was Puerto Rican is nonfiction, but Santiago relies on many techniques important to fiction writing. So to Greg and to the others, she does take license as an author to use both fiction and nonfiction styles. So, you know, she could do what she wants with the character as she pleases.
Yeah, this seemed like a really bad school they went to. Like there's a fight in the hallway and in the bathroom, and it just seems so like heavy with race and the Italians and the blacks and the brass knuckles and the knives. Like I felt for the first time in this book, I felt like I was there, you know, instead of reading about it. I felt like I was like, there was a lot of action going on and it really felt very intentional. And I kind of felt there in the sense that I was someone who has never seen it before, right? Being someone from another country coming into this high school or this middle school and like seeing these groups of kids fighting and bloodying each other weekly. And how big of a culture shock that must have been to her, because even though her school wasn't the best, I don't think we ever got any scenes of kids fighting and things like that. I thought that was really interesting. And how like the Brooklyn Puerto Rican kids spoke English and no Spanish at all.
I like the teased hair. The Italian girls teasing their hair. That was, and the skirt, putting up their clothes to make it shorter. I mean, this is great.
And bear in mind, this is all happening, and I mean, New York City is considered one of the most segregated school districts in the country. Like,
True.
That's something a lot of people lose sight of. And I mean, it was even true then, but even with a little mix of, okay, so you have some Italians in the mix with, you know, Puerto Ricans and Black people, but it's happening through that lens. And there would be a lot of, you know, racially motivated, like race riots or whatever at these schools too. Back then as well was very common. You know, like at least speak for the Bronx and Lehman High School having its fair share of horror stories along those lines. So
You're talking about now, right?
That's just so interesting to me. When I hear about, especially at this age, middle school, when I hear about like this story, children, kids, teenagers fighting each other over race, it's really like about what your parents taught you, right? Because at 12 years old,
most certainly,
are you racist? You know what I'm saying? Like your values come from your parents. It's really your parents fighting each other. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I even think about my own upbringing sometimes and things that I would say, or like how like you have like cancel culture now, right? From things that people would say, like celebrities when they were younger, and it was just like I think of the things that I say, and like who was I? Who did I think I was talking that shit? You know, and why was I doing that? You know, so yeah, it's definitely like their parents and like the institutionalized racism and all that stuff.
There also has been a increase in crimes in New York City within youth. Like we're talking about like with arms involved. And there's some article on CNN and I believe the New York Times too, and the increase of crimes within youth, which is very alarming and scary at the same time. And, I definitely agree with, the same about it's like parents fighting because when you think about the youth and growing up and what they see at home and obviously not having the options too, it's just this is what they're facing at the end of the day, and this is what they're growing up with, a lot of the things that they're seeing. So they're like looking to see methods and programming into like helping de-escalate the high risk, but it's very, very scary.
Yeah, yeah, it's terrifying.
But even with all this, she is making a way through school. She is, she's once again, she's not having any luck finding any friends, but she does seem to be quite intelligent and she is doing well, scoring on different standardized tests, I guess, and things like that.
And she's also assimilating. She's trying to walk. To my head came Diddy Bop. I don't know if you're all familiar with that term, where the blacks, the morenos, were like had a funny walk, and to me it was a Diddy Bop. I even tried a Diddy Bop in my old times. And then she didn't want to side with the Italian girls for fear that the blacks would beat her up for being with the Italians. So she stayed her ground. But she did try to assimilate into the so-called American culture that she was introduced to in middle school.
But she didn't like the Puerto Ricans who were born here didn't accept her, and the Puerto Ricans that migrated here she didn't like.
Well, that goes a long way because they feel you're Americanized, and that's going back to the title, When I Was Puerto Rican. She's not Puerto Rican anymore. She's, you can't be true Puerto Rican in America. You can't. You assimilate. The both are two worlds.
And being like New Yorican is definitely its own experience.
Puerto Rock.
Because I remember my cousins, they went away, like they had lived in Puerto Rico for some time and they were young, probably around the same age as Esmeralda. And then they came back and they were like, they just thought that like everybody like New Yorkers here was so different, that they had like this kind of like air about them since they were actually in, like the motherland of Puerto Rico. So they felt like they had like one up on New Yorkers.
Like the young brother in Dominicana, the kid with the afro, the fro, he assimilated to, and instead of Juan was the husband. So yeah, once you're in New York, you got to bend.
And there was
what's interesting about that, Anna? There are some people who come here, and this is not unique to Puerto Ricans. There are a lot of, New York is a unique place in the sense that we have communities that can sustain native people, and those people can speak their own languages and live in their own communities and never really assimilate into New York or into America, I worked with a guy, we might have worked together for like 3 years. And he was a maintenance worker. So it's a stretch to say we worked together, but we worked for the same place. And he only spoke Spanish. And I asked somebody, a New Yorican, like, how long has he been here? I thought she was gonna tell me maybe like 2 or 3 years. And he'd been here for 30 years. And he had never learned English. He lived in a Spanish neighborhood. Everywhere he went, the people spoke Spanish. So, I mean, you know, to a certain extent, you have to assimilate just to some degree. But in New York, New York feels unique in the sense that you can live here and not assimilate the way you have to in other places.
Absolutely, Ron. And you're right. That's not only Spanish-speaking culture, but
Right.
I know some of my friends who are first generation Chinese have family members who they don't know how to read or write in English, and they were damn near born here. But why would they have to? If you're born in New York, why would you have to? If you live in Chinatown, and all of your family lives in the same building, you eat your own food, you know how to cook it, you can get the ingredients, you can read and write in your own language because your mother's taught you. You know what I'm saying? New York does have that
Doctors.
that not a lot of other places do. Maybe some
Right.
parts of some pockets of California do, but otherwise, like I know when I was growing up in Michigan, there were no Spanish people. There were none. There were white people and black people, and some sprinkles, pockets, maybe very far and few Asian Americans, but they were already first generation. There were no immigrants. There were none. So New York is very, very unique in that sense. And part of me thinks like, surely none of us could go to anywhere in Latin America and go to like Little America, you know what I'm saying, where we could like go get like hamburgers and like speak English and like whatever. But like part of me does wonder if like the janitor that you were taught, or the maintenance man that you were referring to, part of me does wonder, him and people like him, I wonder if they're maybe even missing out on something to be living in America and not be squeezing the full experience out. I don't know. Maybe that's a silly thought, but part of me does think like, are you missing? Would I be? I know if I lived in a Spanish-speaking country and I didn't speak Spanish, I would feel like I was missing out on some opportunities, not necessarily financial opportunities, but just even social opportunities and opportunities to really maybe make the most out of the experience of being somewhere where you're not born.
I would assume he had a full social life. He was
Oh,
married.
New York, absolutely.
I was
He
gonna
had-
say, wait a minute, he was only a
He
janitor.
had children. He was married.
Yeah.
He was amazing. Yeah.
But again,
Yeah,
New York is unique that way.
Unique New York.
I'm
Say
sure
that
there's
10
only
times.
maybe 1 or 2 other places where you can move to and be in a community that is not, you know, in quotes, American.
What is
Military
that?
bases are like that too.
Mm,
There's a lot of military bases that are like that with people from all over.
okay.
So then the question that kind of leaves me with, because, you know, Anna brought up the title as we've done a few times with When I Was Puerto Rican, is then how much of a risk do we think then Esmeralda has of falling into this trap, if you want to call it that? I think it's a trap of, you know, aspiring to whiteness as it is, like moving to a place and being like, I'm going to divest myself of any customary practices, cultural practices of my people, and really just try and aspire to the white middle class American ideal of what it is to be, you know, a person living here.
Well, there's that scene, right, Greg, where I believe I can't remember if it's all of her brothers and sisters, but quite a few of them come to New York, and she's talking about how she's watching, it's after she's been here for a while, and she's watching them eat the food. I think they're eating like potato chips and like Drake cakes and like just American food, and their eyes like light up. And she says like, I hope that look has worn off on me by now. So it's almost like it's almost like you can't even help it. It's not even something that you can, assimilation is something that it's almost something you have to do to survive. And once you start doing it, you don't want to unlearn it, right? Because you can see, just like she kind of saw in her brothers and sisters, how far you've grown, if you will. And there's kind of no going back, I guess. Maybe that's why the book is called When I Was Puerto Rican, because there's no going back after you kind of start on the journey. You can't hit the pause button, and you definitely can't hit rewind.
Yeah, and it makes you think of something that, like, something lost.
Mm.
I don't know, when I first, I mean, I've heard, like, I haven't really heard of the book, but I've seen the book before and I've seen the title, and I was like, I'm not reading this. It sounds sad, or it looks sad, you know. So just from the title, and then and now I'm reading it. So
But mom, mom is assimilating. Mom is here, and mom is about to start getting her freak on again. She meets a neighbor.
Younger man.
Francisco.
Now, how many? I was a little confused. Does she doesn't bring all of the kids with her? Is
Yes.
that correct? She brings
Eventually,
all-
3 months later, they all come back because
I
the
got
father
you.
just got rid of
Okay.
them. Poppy, your Poppy, just scattered them all around. Your Poppy, okay? Case closed. Caso cerrado.
And it
Thank you,
almost
Hannah.
seems like Mommy's assimilation started when she came to New York for the baby's foot, to fix the baby's
Mhm.
foot. It almost seems like her assimilation started then.
and it's funny because it's like she was only coming, right, with the one child. So the neighbor probably saw her. I haven't read that far, so I don't know. But I'm like, maybe the neighbor saw her before with the one child. Now she coming with like 7 other kids.
Willie, wait till you assign your reading assignments to your students and they don't read.
No, that's not this place. You know how we do. You can just come as you are.
There you go.
Okay, no
One thing
grade.
I want to point out in the chat, Liliana, if you don't mind, just kind of talking a little more about what you mean by the mom's assimilation being surprising.
Yeah, no, I think it was surprising to see her, wanting to adapt and move on quickly. Like I never expected that, knowing how she wanted to be with Papi and wanting to get married. But it makes sense now that we're talking more about it, that if anyone who wants to like move forward is her, because she's been waiting for Papi all the time and wanting more from him, and seeing that, going to New York and seeing a different way of living, and probably seeing a lot of women being independent, doing their own thing, it kind of gave her hope. And that's why when she went back to Puerto Rico, she's like, do you want to marry me? Yes or no? Like, okay, great. And, she packed her bag and she left to New York. But now thinking about it, like, yes, it was surprising, but now it makes sense why she was the quickest one to, want to jump into the American lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like, even though, yeah, Willie, you're right. It's like that Kanye West song. She's like, I thought you had, it's like, I think it's Gold Digger, when Kanye's like, I thought you had one kid and then I pulled up in the Benz and y'all all got in. Like, I wasn't expecting that, And I wonder I do wonder if, since being in Puerto Rico and having all of those kids, I wondered if she could get another man on those grounds, right? Like in Puerto Rico, maybe everyone knew her as Papi's woman or Papi's wife, even, if you will, where she didn't even stand a chance, even if she wanted to move on. And then when she came
Right,
in the
because it was
door,
like you knew Poppy would be fighting somebody if there was another guy in the house, you know?
yeah,
Really?
Would he really?
I
Really?
think he would. I think he would. Actually, yes.
I don't think so.
I
Poppy
don't
doesn't
think
seem
so.
like a fighter.
He'd be like,
He
okay,
doesn't seem like a fighter to me.
okay.
Not
Poppy
even
seem
when his
like whatever.
territory is. Not even when his territory is being.
He'd be like, you have a Thursday, Friday, I'll take a Saturday, Sunday. I
Okay.
don't think so. I don't think he would fight. I mean, come
No.
on.
And
He might
switch that
yell.
poetry up real quick and use them hands.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with you, Liliana. I definitely agree with you. Where you would think that she would be this like doting common law wife and just be like, well, this is my life now. I have all of these children, but she didn't. You know, she. Well, I don't know if the neighbor and her are going to get together, but you think so, Ron?
Dude,
Oh, Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
they're
Yeah, that's in
dedicating,
the chapter.
they're dedicating too much time to it for it to just fall
Did I
flat.
read on too much?
Mm.
But is she 30? Is like the mom 30 yet?
Yeah, yeah.
In the 30s.
How old is she?
She's
Greg?
in her
30.
30s.
30 something. We don't
Okay.
know exact, but yeah.
Well, that's
She's
why
30 and she has 7 kids.
That's
Yeah,
why-
she's just 30 and she has 7 kids. I thought they mentioned it somewhere.
Mhm.
With
she
7
got her
kids.
whole life ahead of her.
With more kids available, like more kids to come.
Probably, right? Because she could still have children.
She's only 30. Why not have more kids?
Why not? Poppy's there. He's available.
Did I read on? Because she does
Everybody
find
like-
herself a young stud.
You read on,
No, that's the section we had to read.
oh, okay.
Thank you. Some of us read. I read this like an assignment, man. Yeah, well, unfortunately, he gets cancer, but and Tata is what? Her sister? The
That's her
woman
mother.
who
Her
no,
mom?
Tata, the one
Her
that she
mom?
lives with in New York.
That's
It
her
was her
mom.
mom.
No, it's not.
Remember when she came the first time? I believe like
That's not their abuela. Tata is not their abuela. She's a woman that lives with her. I don't know if they're related.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Don Julio's and Tata,
But why does she hate the neighbor so much?
because he's
Tata.
younger than she is. That's not good for a young man to go
okay.
out with a older woman. But if an older woman, let me mix it up. If a young man wants to go out with whoever he wants, is okay. But if an older woman wants to rock the cradle, oh man, no.
wait, what point of view are you speaking from? Like your personal
That's Tata's point of view. That's why she doesn't like
Oh,
Francisco.
that's why. I didn't understand why she didn't like him so much.
Oh, okay.
Because she's in her 30s and he's in
She's
his
like
20s.
23, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, good for her, man. Rock the cradle.
And Brandon, getting back to the title, she said, in writing this book, I wanted to get back to that feeling of Puerto Ricanness I had before I came here. Its title reflects who I was then and asks, who am I today?
True that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm.
Two worlds. You're in between two worlds.
It kind of seems though as if all their lives, sorry, Ron, I know this isn't going to be your favorite line I'm about to say, but it seems like all of their lives, including Mommy's, start when they leave Poppy. When he's out of the picture, that's when she was Puerto Rican. He's not in her life, her American life, you know? And it seems like that's when her life really starts, if you will.
She sees opportunity there, even with all of the children. I think it's very commendable for her to leave, jump ship from Puerto Rico and leave with her 3 kids at that point, and then get the rest later. I mean, that's something that's scary, right, to do. And really leaving your other children behind and not really knowing when you can call for them or get them, but she's doing it. And I think before the last session, that was the other thing that I was thinking, that when she comes to New York, she's going to get a taste of freedom. She's going to get a taste of the opportunities that are available to her. And so what if she has to scrub floors or whatever? I think that when that page, when you guys were talking about like the jobs and stuff, that happens with a lot of immigrants that come to New York. They feel like they will do whatever it is that they need to do in order to get that dollar. And they will look at Americans that are here already not getting that dollar and not appreciating whatever job it is. And then they go back home and they go and buy houses and cars and they live very well off of what they've made here. And they look at so-called Americans and say, really? Like, what are you guys doing for yourselves? So she had a taste of that. And then when that scene that she goes back, I think you were saying, Brandon, that they started a little business that, was it a truck? I wasn't really clear if it was a truck or something.
Food truck.
A
Yeah.
food truck.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think that a part of her may have seen the ambition. It may have probably seen some kind of ambition in Poppy, right? So she probably was like, at first she probably didn't see anything, but then the whole idea of, oh, okay, let's do this truck, this food truck or whatever it was. And then he proved to her that I don't even know how to run a business. I don't even know how to do this. Like, I'm giving people on credit or whatever it was. And that falls apart. So everything he's doing, it seems like it's just kind of falling apart. You're not really doing anything to better yourself or whatever. And to going back to the idea of her saying, oh, are you going to marry me? I'm not exactly sure if she was just saying that to like test the waters, or did she really, really authentically want to get married? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean, she had all these kids and he's saying, okay, well, I gave the children my last name. What else do you want from me? But I don't even know if that was even sufficient. I don't even think that she really wanted to get married to him.
I think, Barbara, too, it raises the question for me too, like, what is Poppy committed to? Is he committed to anything?
That's definitely a good point. What is he committed to? Nothing really, right? Because he has the opportunity to come and go as he pleases. But once you have that obligation, or that, so to say, written paper or signed document, you feel like that's going to do anything. If he wants to do what he wants to do, it's going to happen regardless, right?
Yeah, definitely. And even thinking to like he can't commit to like a career, right? Or like even like the food truck. He can't even commit to the kids at the end that he has. So
The ones that we know about. But
that too.
you know
I
what?
mean, the only thing I will say, and not because I'm trying to get onto Team Poppy, is he probably is coming, if you see to both perspectives, right? He's probably coming in as, this is too much for me. This is stressful. Like, I don't want this. Like, okay, I had these children, but okay, so what? Like, you take care of them. Like, he's dealing with his own stresses. I don't even know what they are because we see very little on Poppy's side, right? But
Yeah, but a lot of that stress is self-created.
oh, absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you, Willie. I'm just trying to play, like, thinking in terms of, okay, well, he's probably in his own mind kind of like, oh God, I don't want to deal with this. Like, what is he thinking? What is he going through? But in essence, he doesn't really have to worry, right? Because like, he could literally just walk out the door and go to Maria's house and whatever, like, you know, I'm just making up a name here, but, you know, just do his business over there and come back whenever he feels like it when the air is toned down. But you're not willing to like sit there in the fire and brew it and just be like, okay, I made this, I created this, like Willie said, I'm creating this. So I need to be here.
Yeah, and the person who you think has the least agency, right, is Mommy, right? Because she has all these children that, she's definitely tied to, and she's the one who gets away. So it's like also very empowering too.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was saying. Really, like that is empowering. That's very brave to just get up and go. I mean, I'm talking like you can get up and go to like another town and it's hard, but getting up and going to another part of the state or whatever, like literally relocating completely with your children, one that needs like some serious medical conditions that you don't know where your next dollar is going to come from, and be in a railroad apartment or whatever it was that she was in. That's scary, but like Willie said, that is empowering for a woman to be able to do that, to up and go and do that.
Takes courage.
Yes.
One thing I thought was interesting that actually a point that Greg made earlier reminded me of how when she's in America, we get that like string of thought about what was going on when Marilyn Monroe died. And I mean, surely she didn't know who, I don't even think they had ever seen a television really before. I think they seen one, they said once before, but in PR, there's no way she knew who Marilyn Monroe was, right? So that idea of kind of celebrity, white celebrity, infiltrating her timeline happened when she came here, right? And that's just so interesting to me how, I mean, I'm not quite sure if there were any Puerto Ricans like celebrities back then or even
What?
Spanish
Yeah, what?
American,
Yeah. What's her name? Iris Chacon.
American celebrities, but I think like it's just so interesting how this like blonde, white, bombshell figure of Marilyn Monroe, especially she's going to the school where no one looks like Marilyn Monroe. There's Black kids, there's Puerto Rican kids, there's Jews, and there's Italians, but no one's really out here like flaunting like European looks like Marilyn Monroe is. So it's so interesting to me that that is the one big American celebrity figure that we get in this book. I thought that was really interesting. It gave me kind of Dominicana vibes in the sense that we got quite a few JFK, Malcolm X. There were quite a few kind of figures in that text, but it was interesting to me how Marilyn Monroe was did anyone else pick up or notice that?
Yeah, because then she relates it to when that truck driver, that very uncomfortable scene with the truck driver, she's basically adopting this persona of what she thinks a woman's supposed to be in terms of sexiness, while at the same time admitting that she was frightfully scared of this entire scenario of this man in the truck. That was definitely a very sad scene there.
Yeah, and how she was really just mimicking what she had seen Marilyn Monroe doing, a white European looking woman. Marilyn Monroe always looked at the camera. Marilyn Monroe always did this. I thought that was so interesting how that was played.
Marilyn Monroe was like maybe Barbie doll to a lot of us children of color. There were no little black or brown dolls at the time, and Marilyn Monroe was an icon, a TV icon. So, and I also thought about the Dominicana with Malcolm X when he got shot and how, historical that was. So it's not the same, but when Marilyn Monroe, and then all the Kennedy relationships with Marilyn Monroe came out later on. So, and there's a figure in Puerto Rico like her. Her name is Iris Chacon. She was a voluptuous Puerto Rican, very talented, better than J-Lo, and she was out there doing her thing. So, I don't know, maybe there's that connection. Marilyn Monroe, Iris Chacon, being feminine, female, big boobs, all that stuff. And then that's true, that scene with the truck driver, you know, what's the term we could use? Hacking off, jerking off, or whatever. And
Masturbating.
she is not understanding it. And then she comes back and smiles at him, and he's totally turned off by that. So, oh,
But it does feel like she does understand what's going on. She's not completely like oblivious to what this man is doing and what her presence, the role her presence plays in this act of this guy standing there masturbating.
oh, that's a better word, yeah.
Which was a weird, that scene almost felt like a man wrote it.
No,
The amount of time that Negi lingers in the window looking almost feels like some male fantasy that a young girl would stand there looking at him masturbate. That's how it felt to me.
okay, Ron.
I'm thinking too much.
No. No, you're
I
the
wondered why
man.
she stayed that long too, to be honest. Why
She went back and forth, right?
She
I don't know.
she admits to her curiosity, yes, but she also admits that she was
Intrigued.
scared. I don't know if uncomfortable is the word used at any point, but she's also scared mixed in with fear. And it's also speaking to the fact that her willingness as it continues, and she's clearly willing to be in that window, is what completely kills his mood. Like that's like the very last sentence. Whatever he'd wanted from me, he didn't want anymore. And I was certain because I'd been too willing to give it to him. Like it literally made him go
Yeah.
flaccid. So it's like she's learning a lot to add to her, as she called it, scant knowledge of sex right in that moment. And she even calls it my first sexual experience.
Weird.
Even though she did have that weird, like, grabby moment with,
Pico.
yeah.
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 Oh my God, you going back there?
She did have that little weird moment with him, but yeah, it was odd. But at the same time, I wondered if she had heard so much at school about sex and like about cursing and about what sex is and what porn is. I wondered if like she had heard so much about it from her classmates that she just needed to know, needed to know what they were talking about, needed to know like what it was for herself. Part of me wondered that. I didn't get the vibe that she was sexually curious for herself, but more for like maybe where she could place sex in the world. It seems like she, even though her mom had all those kids, and even though it seemed like she had walked in on her parents a couple times doing something, she really didn't seem to have any idea about any sex at all.
Well, I think like it's like sprinkled throughout the book. And I think she definitely has a curiosity. Like, and then when she talks about like her parents and then stopping and then like kind of like lingering to hear if they're gonna start again, but then they start when she leaves. And then I think she even talked about like the animals, right? Having sex, and then she like kind of brought it to that, like, okay, so this is what they're doing. And so I think that there's definitely a curiosity there, but it was disturbing and jarring though. Even like the whole thing with the gardenia plant and like her trying to put the flower in like her cleavage or something like that with the guy that was looking, and
Oh,
then the mother came with the bags and dropped the bag. Like, what are you doing? So the mom knows too, like also that, you know, from the bushes with the boy, that she has this kind of curiosity. But I didn't read the part. I didn't get to that part with the truck driver, so I don't know.
oh, sorry. We
Oh,
No, it's fine.
but isn't that an age as a,
It
you
is.
know,
And that is
uh,
the age where children are very like,
yeah, they're
curious,
very
exploring.
curious.
Yeah, but as I mean, it's disturbing and jarring because I say like the adult who's involved, you know?
Oh, yeah, well, there's always a weird adult involved.
Well, there shouldn't be. There should be no weird adults involved.
Absolutely not. No, that's
Welcome to New York.